Thank you and welcome everyone. As said, this is one of our academies in our ongoing effort to merge the two Nfield managers. We have a CAPI Manager and what was formerly known as the Online Manager. That is a project that we started more than 3 years ago. And we are finally at the tail end of that project in the sense that we are getting ready to shut down the CAPI Manager altogether. And this is our first session where we will explain how we do that. There will be not much new in this session because the thing we are going to shut down in the CAPI Manager has already been released in the new Online Manager more than a year ago, and we already run an academy a year ago about those simple points with or without quota. But with that, let's rerun this academy for those of you who have not moved your production work from the CAPI Manager to the Nfield Manager yet, because very soon we will shut down this scenario altogether in the CAPI Manager. And with that, let's take a look at the precise agenda. I will run a very short introduction. That is basically the introduction that I have been running for all these academies about those merge, about this merge project. The major part will be a demo where I will show you how you can use those simple points with or without quota in the Nfield Manager. We'll take a look at the timetable and we'll take some time for questions. The timetable, I will also move that up immediately now so we can take a very short look at the timetable for those of you who are already very familiar with how those simple points work in the Nfield Manager and are only curious what exactly is that timetable. Let's very shortly talk about the timetable. We'll go in more detail at the end of the demo. Most important part is that on April 11th, we will shut down, or we will flip the API. The API at this moment, so if you use the Nfield tool, or if you have built a tool yourself that creates simple points and then simple points for simple points with or without quota in the manager, that API at this point creates those simple points in the CAPI Manager. From April 11th onwards, that API will create those simple points in the Nfield Manager, so in the new manager. Nothing in your API call will change. That is purely a change in the backend. But from that point onwards, all the simple points that you create using that API will be created in the Nfield Manager. At the same date, we will also shut down the creation of those simple points with quota in the CAPI Manager. And if you are a bit hesitant what that exactly means, let me show you what that then precisely would mean. Go quickly to the CAPI Manager, which is this one. We go to surveys and we'll say add surveys. There are several survey types that you can do here. There are 3 left. We already moved one survey type. The one that we will remove on April the 11th is the CAPI with simple points and quota. That one will be gone from April 11th onwards. Those two, the other two with the simple points with addresses will still be here, but we will remove those probably in May. But we'll talk in more detail about that at the end of the demo. So, with that, let's go back to the presentation. Okay. So why are we doing this at all? As said, I have run these slides from the beginning, so I will quickly go over these slides just as a reminder. We have 2 managers. That is confusing, and that is time consuming because that means that we need to test everything in 2 managers. And we have decided to merge those two managers into one. And we will do that by moving all the CAPI functionality from the CAPI Manager into the Online Manager, which also means that from now on, we will refer to that Online Manager as the Nfield Manager. As said, we are doing this because it's confusing to have two managers. It's time consuming. We chose to merge the CAPI Manager to the Online Manager because the Online Manager actually has features that are missing from the CAPI Manager. So it makes more sense to move the CAPI functionality to the Online Manager, and that CAPI Manager has an outdated look and feel. How will that merge take place? Well, you already saw part of that. We will merge the CAPI scenario, so that is the basic surveys, the sample points, with and without quota, and the sample points with addresses. We will move those scenarios to the Nfield Manager one by one. We already moved the basic survey to the Online Manager, and we closed down that basic survey in the CAPI Manager. And this Academy here is to inform you about our next step, and that we will close down the survey with sample points and quota in the CAPI Manager too. And then finally, we will move the survey with sample points and addresses with and without quota. As said, we expect that we will release that in the Nfield Manager probably at the end of this month. Then we will run an academy, and then we will close down this scenario in the CAPI Manager pretty soon too. What will be merged? All functionality of the current CAPI Manager will be merged with the Nfield Manager. And most of the functionality of the Nfield tool, for example, creating sample points, will move to the Nfield Manager as well. You will see that later in the demo. If you are not familiar with the Nfield Manager at all, here are the URLs where you can find the Nfield Manager in your region. It's important to realize we are changing the interface. We are not changing your domain. So your login credentials that you use for the CAPI Manager, you can use for the Nfield Manager as well. And it will log onto your same domain. The only thing that will change is actually the interface. With that, let's move to the demo. Are there any questions at this point, Art?
No, Frank, no questions yet.
Okay. Yeah. This is our Nfield Manager. As said, it's not a new domain. It's simply a change of the interface of your domain. I will give you a very high overview of the general features here. If you want these features, if you want to know more in detail about that general overview, our first academy about the merge managers completely deals with all those general features. But I will give you a high-level overview if this is completely new for you. If you open the Nfield Manager, it will start with a list of all the surveys in that manager. You will see that in this tab that you are on the surveys. Access is where you give people access to your domain and where you manage the people that have access to your domain. One feature this manager has, which is not available in the CAPI Manager, is that you can create survey groups, and you can appoint people to survey groups, and you can appoint surveys to survey groups, and then your users will only see those surveys that actually match their survey groups. Again, there is an entire academy about this, how you should set this up. So if you want to more details about that, I refer you to that academy. And the next step are the interviewers. Here is where you see your CAPI interviewers. And you don't have to create these CAPI interviewers. This is the same domain as you used in your CAPI Manager. So these are the interviewers that were already there. Management. This is a new tab, at least a new tab if you are coming from the CAPI. If you are coming from the CAPI Manager, where you can have an overview of all the surveys that are running, when they are created, what their status is, who their owner is, and more importantly, what the last activity, when the last activity was on that survey, and what the size of that survey is. We created this overview because we do expect you to clean up surveys if you are not using them, and we expect you to clean up surveys if they become very big. And this is an overview where you can actually check this. Again, we have a entire academy about housekeeping on your domain, which mainly handles about this overview. Repositories, we have not created that we have not made the repositories available for CAPI at this moment, so we can skip this. If you are curious, again, there is an entire academy about these repositories. So that are these steps. Then we have a few icons here. These are your survey defaults. So which teams you are using, the response codes, the buttons and messages. Then we have your domain settings. So this is where you handle your passwords, what the password settings are. One new feature for the CAPI Manager is for the Nfield Manager is that you can enforce two-factor authentication if you want to. So people not only have to log in with a password, but also with a PIN code that they get from a application. So this will make your login more secure, and this is where you can manage your fieldwork offices. And activities, this is where you will find your downloads. And finally, a icon not present in the CAPI Manager, but here this is our knowledge center, and here is where you will find all the documentation and the courses. One of the courses is the Nfield CAPI, and that completely handles this interface. So again, if you are unsure about some of these features, you could start this Nfield CAPI course and learn all about that. In the documentation, you will find the Nfield reference, which includes the entire command reference, and the releases gets you all the release notes of the last 2 years. So that is the general overview. Now let's start with actually creating a survey. So we'll go to surveys, create a survey. We'll click here, create survey. Needs to have a survey name. Going to use sample points with quota, and I'm going to create that manual for the first time. So that's our survey name. Survey group, as said, that's a feature. That's a feature from the Nfield Manager. I will use the default survey group for now. And you can choose the channel. If you only have a CAPI license, you will only see CAPI here. I have a CAPI and an online license for this manager, so I see both. CAPI, create a survey, and we'll get in this page with 4 new tabs: general, questionnaire, quota, and fieldwork. We land on questionnaire if we create a survey, and the first thing that we can do here is upload a script. Let's do that very quickly, very small script. Save that, it's fine. I can upload media files here too if I had any, and I can upload new languages for this survey specific. For now, we'll do it like this. And if you are only familiar with the CAPI Manager, you will probably have noticed that I have not chosen yet what kind of survey this is. And that is because we have moved that decision to the point where it actually matters. And the kind of survey, so if you are using sample points, if this is a free intercept, if you are using quota or not, That only matters the moment when you actually start defining your sample or want to make your assignments, because that's the moment that is what determines what sort of survey this is. So that choice, we have moved to this point. So here is where you can choose the free intercept joint targets or individual targets, which are the basic survey types. If you want to use sample points, you have to have at least a target, not necessarily a detailed quota, but at least a target. So I need to define that target. I do that by clicking here on configure quota and then choose for set a target only and not for quota variables. So I will set a target, save it. And if I then go back to sample and assignments, I can now choose the sample points. Wet quota, I need to save that one too. And then you see 3 new tabs appearing here. The method, which I already chose, and then I can move to sampling points, where I can create or upload my sample points, interviewers, where I can do the assignments, and quality control, which is where you approve, reject interviews, which is a feature that was already also in the CAPI Manager. So let's move to sample points. New for this manager is that you can actually create your sample points here or upload a Excel file with sample points directly from the manager. For this manual thing, we will first actually add a sample point manual. So we'll click here. We need to give that an ID. We'll call it sample point 1, a name. Target, let's give it 10. Group ID is not needed. The field work office, if that is needed, if you use field works, if you use that for your interviewers, I do use that, so I will assign this one to field work office Amsterdam. Save it, and there is my created sample point. Assigning interviewers to the sample point. That can be done using different ways. I can use the sample point as a starting point to assign interviewers. That is probably the way you will often do that. I can do that 2 ways. I can simply open the sample points, click assign here, and then choose the interviewer I want to assign. I do that by either assign everyone or by adding a filter and making sure that that filter will create the 1 or 2 or group of interviewers that I want to assign. So that is one way directly from the interviewer. I can create a filter here and then actually filter if I had more than sample points, if I had more than 1 sample point, and then actually filter the interviewers or filter the sample points that I want to assign. I could also use interviewers as a starting point for those assignments. I can click assign some interviewers. Again, add a filter to come to the interviewer that I want to assign. So I will this time start as interviewer. And then simply click assign all the interviewers that meet this filter, only 1. And there is my assignment. From now on, this tab actually has the assigned interviewer. So if I want to assign a new interviewer, I need to go to the unassigned interviewers and remove the filter. And then I can assign these interviewers. Also, I could assign these directly from the interviewer itself by opening that interviewer, click assign, and then choose a sample point where I want to assign this interviewer. Other tabs we see here is the assigned quota. It's not as much assigned quota, it's quota. It's the actual quota to this interviewer. We don't have quota here, we only have that survey target. You will see slightly more detailed later on when we actually are using the quota. And we have the assigned sample points, where I have an overview of all the sample points that are actually assigned to an interviewer. Okay, that's creating those sample points manual. Let's do a new survey and let this time upload those sample points using a file. So I will create a new survey, sample points with quota, upload, CAPI, create. I go to sample and assignments directly. And this time I need to configure the quota. And I have a quota for this. So I need to create the quota frame that I use in those sample points. If I don't do that, those sample points will be refused if I try to upload them. So I need to create a quota frame. Creating quota frames in this manager is a lot easier than creating quota frames in the CAPI Manager. I simply create those variables, and the variables I use is age, gender. And that would then be male, female. And I have a second one called age, young, old. Those are all the variables that I use. I also interlock these variables. I have interlocked age with gender in my quota frame. In the CAPI Manager, that meant that you have to redefine all those and type it again and again. In this manager, that is much easier. I click on order and nest variables, and I move the age one tick up, and now I have interlocked gender with age. Next step would be define targets. For time's sake, I will only do the general target. I will not move any targets in here. I will have a complete example later where I actually have filled these targets. But for now, let's do it like this. Save it. And if I now go to sample and assignments, I can use the sample points with quota. Save that, go to sample points, and this time I can upload a file. I can also download a template. If I click on that one, that will give me an empty Excel file, but with all the targets already, with all the field names already there, including those ones that are needed for the quota target. So this is a very fast way of creating a template that you can then fill. I already did that, so I don't have to fill that template. I can upload a file and then use this example. This has the same format as the files that you would use in the upload tool. So we have 4 total, 4 inserted. So that's okay. And these are the 4 we have. And as you can see here, look at the quota. You can take a look at the quota belonging to these sample points. This is a very nice feature of the Nfield Manager, that we actually have a complete overview of that quota, which again is missing from the CAPI Manager. If you are using sample points, you only have this overview in the CAPI Manager of the total of the survey, but not this overview, which is the total of the sample points that you have selected here. So this is the target of all those sample points combined. If I open one, I can actually see the targets of this particular one sample points. Assigned interviewers are all the interviewers that are assigned to the sample point. I will not repeat that part because that is the same step as you had to do previously. I will jump to the example that I already prepared, which is this one, which has data. This is the same quota frame and sample points as I showed you previously, but I already assigned some interviewers, and I collected some data here. So we actually have something to show you here. If you see 2 assignments here, 2 interviewers, one is assigned to 1 sample point, the other interviewer is assigned to 2 sample points. This interviewer, as you can see, is actually active because this is true. This interviewer has not downloaded his assignment yet. So that's what you see here. You can also see the counts of interviewers. This interviewer did 5 successful interviews. No dropped out, no screened out, nothing rejected. And obviously the first interviewer did nothing because he hasn't downloaded his assignments yet. Quota. Again, an overview of the quota that has been achieved, the quota on the sample points, and then how they might relate to the survey targets. These again are the survey targets, so not sample point targets. Also, this is where you will find the status of the data of this interviewer. So from this interviewer, you actually see here that not all the assignments has been synced yet. Remember, these are sample points. But quota, you could assign more than 1 interviewer to these sample points. So each time when you start an interview, the KT client attempts to sync at least the numbers back to the Nfield Manager. So it could very well be that the numbers that you see here, you see 3 successful mails, but if you download the data, that there are not data, because these are only the counts synced and not the data has been synced yet. This is one of the most often problems that we see in on our help desk, that people download data and then say, hey, I'm missing 4 or 5 interviews compared to the counts here. And always when you see that, check the status of your interviewers here. And if you have an interviewer that has not sunk all of his data, chase that interviewer up. Because that is almost certainly the reason why you see then less data here. So assigned quota, assigned sample points. Same, you see the sample points here, and who is assigned to that sample point. Same. So that is coming in from that sample point. Monitor field work, which is a general overview of the without the sample points. It's the same as you would see here if you are looking at the sample points, the assigned quota. And this is slightly more detailed. Interviewers is an overview of the interviewers assigned to the sample point. So it's the same sort of view as in sample points, but as starting point interviewers and not the sampling points. The quality control is where you can reject and approve interviews. I think that's it for the demo. Any questions at this point, Art?
No question, Frank. All clear.
Yeah, one more thing that I forgot to mention. In the assignments, as I said, you can use the sample points as starting point of the assignments. You can use interviewers as starting point for the assignments. You can do that directly on that sample point or create a filter and then assign a system. You can also still upload these assignments through the Nfield tool. Nothing has changed there. Let's remove back to our presentation. So, timetable in more detail. First thing, creating sample points with quota that should be turned on for all domains. It should be turned on for all domains for quite a while, months, but that is a manual task. So maybe we did miss something. So please check that now on your domain. If you are not certain, whatever, you can actually create those sample points with quota in the Nfield Manager. If not, inform us as quickly as possible so we can turn this on for you. As said, in 2 weeks, on April the 11th, we will flip the API, and then the API at that point will create those simple points with quotas in the Nfield Manager and no longer in the CAPI Manager. At the same date, we will remove the capability to create those simple points with surveys in the CAPI Manager. So you can no longer create new surveys with simple points and quota in the CAPI Manager. And you can, the surveys that you started there, so the old surveys, you can start those in the CAPI Manager, but I would advise you to actually migrate those surveys. So very quickly take a look in the Nfield Manager, because migrating those surveys is very easy. I have created one survey here, sample points with quota in the CAPI Manager. So this survey has been created in the CAPI Manager. You can see that because it has the tag here to be migrated, meaning it is a survey that would run in the CAPI Manager. To migrate it, simply go to Setup, click this button, migrate this survey, and from that point onwards, you can manage this survey in the Nfield Manager. Would advise you certainly from April the 11th onwards to migrate all your running surveys, all your running survey point with quota surveys to this manager, so you manage them all in one place and not have them spread out in 2 different managers. And you don't have to wait for that in 2 weeks. You can do that now as well. Okay, and then the last remaining scenario in the CAPI Manager is then create simple points with addresses, with or without quota. So we will move that to the Nfield Manager probably this month. That is needs one more thing, and those are the spare simple points. Those are added at this moment, and when that is ready, we will release those simple points with addresses in the Nfield Manager, and that will have the same route as we are taking for this one. When we have done, when we have released that in the Nfield Manager, there will be an academy where we will go over all the details, and then a few weeks later we will flip the API for the creation of those simple points too. So from that point onwards, the simple points with addresses will be created in the Nfield Manager too, and at that point we will close that scenario in the CAPI Manager as well. That's the timetable. Any questions about the timetable?
No, Frank, no questions.
Then we are at the end. So as always, recording of the session will be available later this week. Manuals are updated. I already showed you where you can find those manuals. And as said, the next Academy session will be about the CAPI with addresses. Thank you for joining. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.